Hello. So my title is Snap Back to Reality, Here Comes Gravity. It's the title I use everywhere, no matter where I present, even at the kindergarten or at the conference. It's inspired by Eminem lyrics, and there are a few correlations to it. Since I started to work with a lot of immersive technologies, and also since I was a really strong dreamer as a kid, you know how it is. Sometimes you need to snap back to reality because gravity hits you. Working in a corporation, being a creative, working in super strict environments, working with super complicated and complex technology where you have limitations in where computing can take you. And there are many more things where I learned that I have to snap back to reality and still work on my dreams. I'm Timmy. I'm, as I said, a futurist, an innovation leader, a dreamer, a creative, a nerd. And I will present you a bit of my story of how I felt as a misfit between these worlds. Being a creative, being a technologist, trying to find my crowd, my community. So I'm from Oradea, and as a kid, I was super passionate about computers, games. I really wanted to build my own games, and I followed that path. But as any other teenager, I got distracted, and I wanted to be a rock star instead. So I was like trying to play music, and I had always this conflict: like, should I follow that path or should I go with technology? But as I turned 18, I told my parents, and this is the first time my parents are listening to my speech, and they're here. Hey. And I told my parents, hey guys, I don't feel that I can grow a lot in Romania. I'm looking for specific education, and I will go away. I'll go to Copenhagen. I was really passionate about music, so I went to Aalborg University in Copenhagen to work with game design, innovation methods, world building, research, and that was my first snap back to reality. Here comes gravity. Life was hard. I was not prepared for Copenhagen. I was homeless for about 2 months. Sleeping in the airport. If you saw the movie with Tom Hanks, The Terminal, basically I was Tom Hanks in the terminal. I was hiding from security guards. I found a website called sleepinginairports.com where you looked for places and reviews under the stairs or different places where you could sleep. I was playing music to get some cash, to get along. I lived after that in a caravan for a year, and I was still dreaming. I knew that I'll get somewhere, and I got to this magical place in Copenhagen, Aalborg University, where Nokia used to have a research center, and in 2010, when I started to study, Nokia started to go down. And what was interesting there is that when they started to lay off people, all those experts and engineers, they came together, and instead of everyone spending their money in different places, they started companies, new startups. And the university moved in the building, used all the labs that Nokia had, used the senior experts that Nokia had, and combined them with fresh students that were working with new technologies, UX design, and other innovative technologies. And that's where I met some other dreamers, because I remember this story that my mom told me from Genesis about Joseph when he went to Egypt, and he was a dreamer, and when he told the dream to his brothers, they wanted to kill him because, it's like, who are you to dare to dream, right? But I recognized these dreamers, and they were the founders of Unity, and my teacher introduced me. Unity is this game engine started in Copenhagen. It powers more than 90% of all the VR experiences. It's used in automotive, in military, in space, in games. Pretty much all the mobile games that you guys play, it's made in Unity. And I really loved their dream. Their dream was to democratize tools and technologies to enable more creatives and more developers to create experiences easier. And I really like this aspect of democratization and what you can do with the tool. So I was that annoying student going to them and say, hey, I want to do this and this and this, and I want to learn. But at the same time, I was always fascinated about cognitive science, how the brain works, and how we can interact with technology. So my grandma, she's from north of Romania in Târgu-Mureș, and she has this gift of reading people. Like, I don't know how she does it. This babushka is like, when she sees a person coming in, she's like, yeah, you're going through this and this and this. And it's like, what's her algorithm? So I started to look how she does it. So I studied eye tracking, and I co-founded a company called the Eye Tribe. We were basically making eye tracking devices to help disabled people interact with computers and so on. And that was a nice vision, but I always knew that the money is in gaming. Like, imagine that you can actually use your eyes to interact while you play games, or, you know, what about other technologies like VR? We went to CS. We were putting eye tracking in everything, smartwatches, tablets, and this was around 2011 or 12. We went to CS and I hacked Fruit Ninja. So basically, you could actually swipe with your eyes instead of using your hand. And Palmer Luckey, Mark Zuckerberg, Richard Branson saw the demo. We got a lot of investment. Palmer Luckey, the founder of Oculus, gave me a really early prototype of the Oculus. I took it back to Copenhagen and I put an eye tracking system in it. And I invented a few patents around foveated rendering, meaning that the objects that you were looking at were rendered at a super high quality, and everything else was compressed. It's basically how our eyes work, right? Our brain cancels a lot of the things that we are not looking at, and it uses memory to reconstruct some of the images. Then I was also thinking about emotions, like if my grandma was able to read people, can I look at pupillometry? Can I detect when people daydream when they're interacting with something? So I filed a series of patents, and then Lego asked me, since Lego is in Copenhagen and in Denmark, in Billund as well, they wanted to create a Star Wars game. And they saw that I was using eye tracking, I was working with Unity, they were working with Unity. So they invited me to do a bit of research with them on how can I use eye tracking and brainwaves to interact in games, basically making a Jedi simulator. I made this for my thesis, so basically you were sitting in front of a computer, and then when you were looking at a spaceship and thinking when to shoot, that was happening. Everything looked amazing on paper, but snap back to reality, here comes gravity. I had to make it work for small kids that can't stand still in front of a computer. They were moving all over. Technology was quite weird and heavy to wear it. So I started to look at how can we accommodate for it. And that gave us a lot of attention. A few years later, we were bought by Facebook. I entered in a lawsuit with Facebook. I was, again, kind of a biblical story. I thought that I can be David and fight Goliath. I was encouraged by people to do so. The reason was I saw the potential, but also the dangers of technology. I could imagine scenarios. I always liked movies, from the future. That inspired me, and that's how I started to research and work with all this stuff. So I actually they were buying my patents, the company, but I didn't want them to be able to use eye tracking in consumer headsets. Like in enterprise, in research, in corporations, it makes sense, right? But kids playing games, there is that saying that the eye is the mirror to your soul. Basically, if you extract all that information and combine it with the interactions they're making, and now all these extra cameras that for mixed reality can track literally all the furniture you have in the room, and if you're looking there or not, you can have targeted ads and like super, super rich data that you can work on. Again, snap back to reality. I was a student. Californian lawyers are super expensive. I was like, okay, what do I do now? So I was living for a bit in Silicon Valley, another dream of mine. But then snap back to reality, it was not as I imagined. Like that whole tech world and seeing, why would tech companies sue each other? Or like, why did all have like this super extreme competition? And I was a bit naive, right? Like I wanted to use technology to save humanity or something. But then I saw, the capitalistic aspect of it and like how the money aspect works with these things. With patents, I was always about open source and so on, but then I learned that I have to protect what I'm working with. I managed to negotiate some of those patents. Some of them were transferred to Apple. If you saw the Vision Pro, there's a lot of technology I worked on previously, many years ago, on eye tracking. There are very many limitations with eye tracking. I don't know if you know the legend of King Midas from the Greek mythology, that he had this thing that everything he touched turned into gold, even his loved ones. Is the same effect called the Midas touch in eye tracking, that everything I look at gets selected even if you want or not, right? So it's quite hard to use it for interaction. So I was trying to look for solutions there. After that, I was a bit sad that I quit my creative dream as working with music and so on too early. So I went back in Copenhagen and I was learning with a few fashion brands, trying to see how can I tell some stories. I like stories. I'm a storyteller. And I was looking at how to incorporate some Viking Scandinavian symbols and stuff into some of these brands. But I realized it was the same things I was doing in a game engine. Setting a camera, making an environment, working with a script, working with a character. So I returned into building experiences. I was never a corporate guy and I was never a car guy. Like my dad, he likes cars, but I never connected to it. And Volvo had a garage just next to our university, like an innovation garage. And I like this effect, the cantina effect, where we were in the same place and they're like, hey, you're the eye tracking guy. It's like, yeah, we want a simulator because we're working with self-driving cars and we want to see how to detect the state of the human when the human is not driving and in control. How can we build that trust as a currency, that you trust that the car systems will, notice the environment or a dangerous situation and that you're aware of it, and if you're required to take control, you'll take control. So I was working with them to build a simulator like that. I also needed a corporate job to pay the lawyers. But what I realized was the scale of automotive. I was like, okay, for instance, the patent I built on detecting if somebody's daydreaming while they're driving, or if you get into an epileptic seizure, I can detect that around 5 minutes before. That can save lives. So if you take that technology and you multiply it by 2 million cars, potentially I can save 2 million lives. Which made me think, like, okay, corporations are bad, automotive is bad, like we want to save the world, we want to save the environment, but like the scale, the power of it. So if we actually are able to think, like, Volvo vision is freedom to move in a safe, sustainable, and personal way. How do we move from human-centric safety to society safety to planetary safety, right? So that kind of started to make me think a lot on how can I use technology and storytelling to create new scenarios that are informing what type of strategies we need to do together as industry, policymakers, cities, and so on. So after I started at Volvo, I started in a janitor room where I put a paper saying out of order, and I built there a VR lab. One manager thought that I'm working on another project, another manager thought that I'm doing something else. So I started to hack the system, the corporation. I learned how to trade information. So I went to brand department and I said, hey, I can build a car configurator for the new Volvo S90 if you give me cash, so I can build a simulator for that department. So I was like trading assets and promises around the company, and I made them all work around me, which was really, really interesting. So I told a bit the story again because my whole life was this battle of who am I? I felt like a misfit. Am I a creative or I'm a nerd? And then I learned that I can be both. And I think in that intersection between critical thinking and creative thinking, that's when true innovation happens. I always say this, you need a box to think outside the box. And for me, automotive was a really, really big box. And I learned everything about it to see where I can expand beyond it, beyond cars. What's a future without cars, for instance? Another thing is how to move from a vision to a solution. I was talking about dreams before. Dreams give you discipline, vision gives you purpose, passion gives you endurance. Like, how much are you willing to stick to that thing till it works? For instance, VR and AR, like I got a lot of doors slammed in my face because, oh, this is for games. We don't have the budget to do it. We can't prioritize it. Till I actually demonstrated that the technology that I built saves around 50 million per car program that we are doing because we're working in a more efficient way. We're identifying a lot of problems earlier and so on. And you need to go through a lot of iterations and imperfections to get there. So having consistency, going like step by step, right? So first, let's see how we can, as I said, build a car configurator. Then how can we actually use it in design reviews? How can we work remotely between California office, Swedish office, Chinese office? And what I learned about it is that, I mean, I'm an introvert, but I found the superpowers of this AR, VR technology. When I took the VR headset the first time and I put it on the head of the CEO of Volvo, he becomes a toddler. He looks at his hands, right? That's what people do in VR the first time. I have to teach him how to walk around and not trip around cables and stuff. And then, of course, I'll show him the latest car concept. But then when he takes the headset off, we are equals. And it's like, hey, dude, don't forget, I just taught you how to walk a few seconds ago. So what I need is this amount of money and investment. So it is a magical device, right? It's like helps you switch perspectives. So that's why now in my work with foresighting and future scenarios, I am able to switch those lenses between EU, commissioners, politicians, policymakers, traffic authorities, other industries, to actually be able to switch perspectives to understand the future scenarios that we all want. Most important thing is deciding what not to do. There's this saying that if you take all the art in the world and you put it in the biggest room, you don't have the biggest museum, you have the biggest warehouse. Museums are about what you decide not to put on the wall. It's about curatorship. And so is your experience in life. You know, when you build a tool and you have a hammer in your head, everything looks like a nail, right? So that's the thing that I had to learn, that I don't need to fix everything with the same technology. So I will show a bit of a video of a vision that I worked on. I'll ask the technical team to start the video.
Origin to destination, A to B. The triumph of human civilization relies on our ability to cover ever larger distances. Travel is as essential to life as the blood in your veins. From the turn of the 20th century, the automobile has shaped the man-made world and profoundly enriched the way we live. It shifted our perception of time and space. Days and weeks on foot or horseback became hours on the road. The miracle of flight further amplified our ability to reach further and faster than ever before. But to fit in an increasingly systematic and mechanized world, we find ourselves having to behave more like machines. In our striving for efficiency, have we lost empathy for the traveler? Efficiency shouldn't be about how much more work you can squeeze into your day. It shouldn't be how quickly you can get to where you're going, but how you get there. What if autonomous travel can eliminate the stress that lurks between A and B?
Okay, so I'll stop it here. One important thing about this video, like that message of we spent so many billions to build self-driving cars, right? And it's like an industry and a promise that we had that promise like 2012 as an industry, right? That we'll have self-driving cars. It's a super complicated thing. And main takeaway is that not everything is about efficiency. It's like we realized, and we do a lot of tests in Sweden and California, and what we realized at the moment that people don't drive their car, they take their phone and scroll Instagram or TikTok. So my question is, are we spending that many billions to enable people to just scroll social media? But then again, who are we to tell them how to use their time or to be that big brother to nudge them, right? So that made me think again that we need new narratives as a society. We need to kind of decouple from this strive of efficiency. And that's what impacted me on building these tools, right? Like, it's not all about building cars faster. It's like, how can we use it, to nudge people with a certain behavior, for instance, towards sustainability and so on. So in the beginning, I spoke a lot about AR, VR, MR. So what are all these words? Virtual reality actually as a concept, even at Volvo, we've been using it since the 80s. And then, of course, it was super expensive. We spent millions for like this magnetic field tracking systems with headsets, cave systems. But technology evolved and it got cheaper and cheaper and it gets better and better and more accessible. So now we're able to cover more and more use cases with it. But then there are different levels of it. You have virtual reality, where you're immersed in a super virtual world. You have augmented reality, basically what you use as Snapchat filters or Facebook filters. And then mixed reality, where all these worlds blend really well. And this is a bit of a history of XR. Since the 60s, Shutterland made this system that, was a bit of an early prototype of VR. Then it was heavily used in military, of course, before, like in simulations and training. Then there were more the first consumer headsets was when, Oculus started, when it was more accessible. And now it progressed beyond, we have Apple, we have Samsung, Google, Amazon, everyone working on a headset, right? And it is inevitable that will become the next computing platform. So we've been starting to use it, at least at Volvo, as I said, for efficiency. Product design, so you would look at the car concept that usually takes 7 years to see from a sketch till it hits the road. Simulation, so in self-driving cars, you need to cover a lot of edge cases, especially in Romania, right? To drive on a highway and you see a horse carriage and, a mattress falls randomly on the road. So those things, you can't actually try them in real life because they're dangerous, you die, right? In Sweden, you see this big moose coming. I almost hit a moose a lot of times, and I was thankful for the safety features of the car that saved my life. But then, of course, there are many aspects of researching human behavior. As we are adding more and more screens in the car or head-up displays, how is that affecting human attention? How can you switch from now it's autopilot or semi-pilot? And that's when people get confused. You don't know when the car is in control or when you need to take control. So all these human factors and trust as a currency, we needed to simulate it and test it and see, okay, what's the best way to communicate this information? And now with AI, can AI agents understand your feeling, your mood, your attention, and say, hey, you haven't been on this road before. Should I turn other sensors on, like LiDAR cameras? Should I tell you to stop and pull over because I see you're super tired, right? So there's a lot of potential to make the journey more enjoyable and safe in that sense. And of course, we started a lot of collaborations with Unity. You know that Volvo, when they invented the seatbelt, they opened the patent to everyone. In the same spirit, all the tools I built for simulation, I made them open. So now everyone that downloads Unity is able to have the latest car simulator, the most advanced 3D model. So if there are startups, universities, they can use these tools to learn how to build for VR and for simulation and automotive. Collaborations with Google, with NVIDIA. That's me as an avatar in the simulator. And here is how a day in my lab at Volvo looked like. We are a bunch of misfits. I even have theologians, poets, philosophers, VR nerds, animators, people from Hollywood, Grammy winners. So I created this space, Open Innovation Arena, inspired by MIT Media Lab, where I wanted to see like convergence of art, technology, design, science. And we are working and experimenting on a lot of the tools that are sometimes even beyond automotive. And my task from the executives was like, how can we secure the industry's future? Like if you look at the European directives, they don't want cars in the cities anymore, right? And it's like, okay, so how can we progress to something else? What if safety means healthcare as well, right? What about wellness? What about privacy, cybersecurity? So there are many ways we can do a lot of experiments and invest. So this is kind of, I think, my peak of what I did technologically. I was the first person to drive with the headset on 5 years ago. And I made something like Tinder for designers. Like you would drive the car and you swipe between car models. And that reduced the time that we take to evaluate models. So a designer can sit in the back seat and just, in Figma or a tool, I tell him, okay, can you change the blinker icons? Can you move them 5 pixels to the left? And with eye tracking, I can measure how efficient these interfaces are. So it enables us to build super fast, but also test safety scenarios like the albino moose. Then remote collaboration, COVID hit, and we were looking at, okay, you can't build a car on Zoom, right? It's super complex. So how do we actually collaborate and work on, all the methods that we already have in research, ergonomics, design, UX, to see like how we can collaborate better. And if you use the same tools, you speak the same language. So designers, engineers, they're able to collaborate way before we are building the car. As you can see, this is shot through Vario headset, a Finnish startup we invested in. It's the most advanced headset, probably 5 times better than Apple Vision Pro, maybe 16 times better than the Meta Quest. It's like human eye resolution. Of course, it also costs $20,000 and you need a super strong computer, but in enterprise, for us, that money saves us so much that it doesn't even matter. Then, of course, all the sensing scenarios as well, like LiDAR. How does computers see the world around us and how we translate it to humans? That made us make history. So when we launched the car project with Vario, with driving on a road, I actually called the police and I said, hey, can I drive with the headset on? And they said, yeah, sure, because headset means also headphones. But I did ask them, so there was nothing illegal there. So I was starting to drive on a highway. I think I was having 160 per hour. Volvo doesn't know that, but it is safest car in the world, right? So nothing could happen to me. And I was amazed, like your brain adapts less than 2 minutes. And that is something that made me so obsessed with human, like cognitive science, how the brain works, how are we perceiving information, either physical, virtual, how do we work with different stimuli, visual, smell, and haptics. As you saw, we also have Tesla suits. So if you've seen Ready Player One, basically it's that suit. You could feel a touch, burn, a bullet. Like I played Half-Life with it and I was afraid to actually, getting shot or something. I had Darth Vader cutting me in half with a lightsaber and I could feel a burn and my brain was like, oh my God, I got cut by Darth Vader. It's like super weird how the brain works. Then with the car, we had the physical car and a virtual one appearing next to each other, and you could see your reflection in both, which is really crazy. And then I could make both disappear, and we made this at the conference in San Francisco. And we were basically everywhere, the news at that day. And one of my favorite and another childhood dream, Adam Savage from Tested, basically Mythbusters, tried to bust my myth. It's a show that I was watching as a kid, and we got featured there, and they were trying to see how it is to drive with the car. And I was surprised what you can do when you're trying to make something new, something that nobody did before. And that is like a virus. It got to me. And I'll show you something incredible that just happened last week outside of automotive. But I got that drive by how do I push the boundaries even more till it scares me. I work with AI, with ethics, with XR, till a point where I get scared, I draw some conclusions, and then I communicate to either EU or the industry, and it's like, hey guys, we need to slow down, or we need an alternative, or we need to do this in a different way. So that's a bit how I got bored by automotive. So this is kind of me, not leaving Volvo, but like mentally, I was like, I got bored by cars. So we as humans are multimodal learning agents. We learn through observation, we learn through touch, through conversations, through different ways, right? And I got interested in this aspect from psychology, cognitive dissonance, when an idea of a thing you have conflicts with the reality, right? So for instance, if you're in virtual reality and you want to touch a bottle of water, but it doesn't react as you expected, you get cognitive dissonance. And then you take the headset off and you say, oh, it's not realistic, right? But this happens a lot. It happens also when you interact with voice assistants, with AI, with technology in general. So the way it works is that you have a knowledge how the world works, and there is inconsistency between action and that thing. So that's when dissonance changes. Like you have a change in belief in the action or the action perception. So dissonance drivers are visual, auditory, touch, smell, taste, and the content that you're seeing. If you played Beat Saber, I don't know how many of you played Beat Saber, like the VR game where you just, like it's like a musical thing and you have like this lightsaber that you cut objects coming. That's the reason why it's successful, because it's simple. It keeps you into a visual stimuli loop. You get a lot of dopamine for doing nothing. Basically, you just move your hands and you see colorful things coming to you and you're scoring a lot, right? Half-Life, the game that I've been playing for maybe 25 years now, they have a VR version, which in my opinion is the most extreme and the best use case for VR. They did this room by room. So in every room you can walk, you can touch objects, it even has liquid physics. But the moment you go to a plant, because the developers didn't have time to implement plant physics, and you try to touch it, you have cognitive dissonance. So you take headset off, right? It's like, yeah, this is not real. So I was obsessed to see, how do I compensate for this? How do we intersect XR and AI to achieve, full immersion? So a lot of pieces, right? So I said about creativity, about technology, about science. The thing is how we move from learning to understanding. And I'm a system thinker. That's how I got diagnosed by my corporate mates. I do see things and I look at how to combine them, right? And that's a bit of an innovator profile. I had to think outside the box a lot. I had to know the boxes really well. But then I was like, how do I use technology beyond the efficiency or for just the sake of technology progress? So I got a lot into world building. As I learned during my career is that if I knock, the doors will open. And I tried to fulfill all my dreams like that. I knocked to many doors. So I'm a big fan of, as I said, some of the science fiction movies. So I called a legend of mine, Alex McDowell, who made Minority Report and Fight Club and Black Mirror, because I really like the technique on imagining the future with such high precision that you're able to inform strategies, and that then you can expand the things we're doing with technology to society, to planet, to the way it impacts the world, right? So this technique started with Minority Report, where Steven Spielberg came to Alex McDowell and said, hey, I don't have a script for the movie, but how does Tom Cruise go to work in 2040? And this movie started to be made in 95, right? So imagine 95, 2040 scenario, and we see a lot of the things that were in that movie as technology of today. Society progresses more than technology, that's a thing, right? So what's interesting that more than 120 patents were recorded in this movie. Voice assistants, interactive ads, hologram avatars, self-driving cars, eye tracking interaction, AR, and that was really fascinating. So imagining the future with such precision that is able to impact the progress and innovations in things that we're working. So these are some of the things, right, that you see from the movie, like self-driving pods, the super famous AR gesture-based interface that was developed by MIT. The car concept was developed by Lexus. The voice assistant in 95 was done with Apple, which becomes Siri today. So a lot of those innovations in the movie just by imagining the world with high precision. So I asked, I want to see what Volvo can be in 2040 or 2050. I want to see what Volvo can be in Jakarta, in Sao Paulo, in Detroit, in China, because we have different timelines. Some societies, some cities progress in different paces than the others, right? So this is what world building looks like. You put a character in the middle, a street corner, and these are all the systems that we interact during the day. Everything from policies to infrastructure to economy. These are all the elements that have an impact to our narrative. Once you set this up, this is an engine that just builds stories, narratives. You don't even need to write them because you have all the parameters and prerequisites for it to happen. So the way it works, you have the story in the middle, then you have the neighborhood, the city, and then the planet. And then you see the scale, on a big scale as ecosystem, how it affects one character. How does one character affect the ecosystem, right? Energy, healthcare, culture, and all these elements help us build these future scenarios with higher precision. I tried this at a few workshops in Rotterdam and in US with cities like Montreal. They're looking at how is future of culture look like in 2050? What is future of opera? And we were able with this technique to imagine a few scenarios that informed really cool initiatives that started to form with these cities. Let's see, I'll skip a few because we don't have time. Yeah, so we use platforms like digital twins to build narratives and then work with the city, for instance, and Volvo on a specific scenario. And that's super powerful, using digital twin as a tool to actually inform and involve citizens into the process that, okay, what does the citizen say about building a new bridge here or doing that, right? So it's like a really effective tool for collaboration. But yet again, I started to think, how do I move beyond technology? All that I presented to you so far was me trying to understand human emotion and working with eye tracking, brainwaves, XR, AI to be able to extract that. Now I'm in a season in life that I look like, how do I nudge emotion, more of my creative side? How do I immerse people in storytelling that I nudge a certain behavior? How do collective imaginated futures change culture? So I looked at the different scale as I showed you. So I started to dream a lot, but in decades, right? Like you saw probably this on Instagram, like dream in years, plan in months, evaluate in weeks, and ship daily. Work on it every day. So I founded the Point Labs, a venture studio, where I combined all these things that I did so far. And I was inspired by Media Lab and Bauhaus movement in the 20s. I was like, we don't have movements anymore. We do have AI art, we do have immersive technologies, AI, but we don't have specific principles how to build it. So I tried to build a curriculum for it, taking through science and research, converting information to knowledge, from knowledge through engineering, forming utility, from utility through design, nudging behavior, from design and behavior through art, changing culture on the long term. And that was the plan, and that's how we work. That was Bauhaus curriculum in the 20s, and that's a bit of the curriculums of the 2020s, where we include beyond architecture, study of wood and drawing and architecture to blockchain, XR, AI, and other technologies. So the thing I told you as a breakthrough from last week, so this is a project I work with some Turkish artists, Ouch Studio. This represents all the data we have about the observable universe. We worked with CERN, SpaceX, and NASA. And we launched this art piece last week on the moon with the Infinity Machine. This is the first art piece that's on the moon right now. And with an XR experience, we will start a series of experiences in a few museums. I tried to push it also in Bucharest and other places of Romania. We'll start with MoMA Museum and Next Museum in Amsterdam, MoMA in US, where people would connect with the art piece on the moon real time and be able, through the emotions that are captured, to send kind of your DNA and a human fingerprint on the moon. This is how we tried to build a version of it. We premiered it at Cannes Festival last spring, and now we can talk officially about it because it's on the moon. It was a long process with SpaceX to get all the legal aspects on. Also, I couldn't say anything about it because we had a case like that with HoloLens before where the rocket exploded, so we couldn't communicate. So it's always a tricky one, but this is the process that we had. We combined science, art, design, engineering. What SpaceX wanted to see with NASA is like, how do we transmit high quality video from Earth to the moon? But we made an artistic excuse, something that unites people, like a dream, right? We always wanted to reach the moon. And I think it's a good example of the point. That's the intersection point of what we're trying to do. Yeah, I think, let me skip through this. Yeah, thank you, that's it.